I'm Brad Barrett, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast.
I have a confession to make. Maybe a few, in fact. I'm retired, but I spend approximately 40 hours a week doing a job. I fill my time doing only things that I love to do, but earn six figures doing it. The grand majority of my income comes from relatively mindless work that takes about 10 hours a week. Yet I spend 30 hours a week doing deeply difficult work that I occasionally wish to avoid, but I do it for free. I am financially independent, yet I am busier than ever. I am happier today than when I quit the job of being a doctor, but that happiness showed up many months after leaving and required not only emotional, but eventually intellectual work. A good friend of mine a bunch of months ago put out this tweet. I quote, "If you continue working after reaching financial independence, you are picking that job over literally everything else in the world you could otherwise do with your time. Okay if you truly love every second of it, but you only get 90 years on this planet, so choose very wisely." Today we ask the question, is the goal to be jobless? With my friend and fellow podcaster, Brad Barrett. Brad Barrett is the host of the top 50 business podcast, ChooseFI, a personal finance expert and a certified public accountant. He has a passion for financial independence and helping people take action to make their lives richer in every way: wealth, health, connections, and ultimately happiness. Brad Barrett, welcome to Earn and Invest. Let me start with a tricky question here. Tell me something you've done in the last 6 months that you dreaded.
Ooh, oh, that's a good one. Well, thank you, Doc. I appreciate it. It's always good to be here. I was not expecting that question. That's a really good one. That I've dreaded. I don't know if there's anything that I've done that I've dreaded. I guess the easy kind of trite answer is that's one of the benefits of being FI, right? Is like you technically have control of your time, but as you said, right, you are working 40 hours. I'm working a significant number of hours. So it's not to say that every hour that I've spent is like unicorns and rainbows. I mean, hardly, right? Like that, and I suspect we'll talk about that a lot. This conversation, right, is the reality and versus what we think of this wonder of FI and how reality intersects with that. But is there anything I've done that I've truly dreaded? I mean, no, I can't think of anything. I'm racking my brain now, but yeah, that's all I got.
Compare and contrast that to when you were actively working as a CPA.
Oh, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Yeah, I mean, dread. Yeah, I mean, all
How about
of
dislike? Yeah, we
yeah,
don't want to go as far as dread. Let's say dislike. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm getting too caught up on that word dread, but which is a brilliant word, by the way. But yeah, I mean, essentially every single day, it was doing mindless tasks that I had done. It was Groundhog Day every day for 13 years, essentially. Well, maybe 12 years, right? Because the first year it was all new. And then at least in my corporate job after I left public accounting. So it was more or less doing the same 250 state tax returns every single year for 13 years. So yeah, needless to say, that wasn't the most intellectually stimulating job. But that said, and this is, I think you are not anti-work. I'm not anti-work either by any means. That was a lifestyle play for me. And it was done very intentionally. And I don't regret it for 1 second. I mean, it enabled me to live the life that I wanted. Right. I worked again. I made this decision with eyes wide open. So intellectually, and I never loved accounting, to be fair. I think the actual bare bones of and the basics of accounting is essential for running your own business. I think it's the language of business. So actual accounting, the debits and credits of things, very important. I picked career in tax, which was just not really my thing. And I just kind of got along that line. But where I was going with that was public accounting is interesting. You're dealing with new clients and new people all the time. And there was a huge upside of potentially being a partner, albeit with a significant downside of having to work for 8 to 15 years and drumming up business, et cetera. So that was not the life I wanted. And I went to work for one of my clients. And again, this was a very intentional decision and it was measured, right? So my salary was decent, but I never made six figures as a base salary at all, ever. But I worked 40 hours a week at most. I worked 8 minutes from my house. So it was a lifestyle play from a pretty early age. And like I was saying, it enabled me to get to FI in my mid to late 30s. And it enabled us to live the life that we wanted, where my wife was able to stay home because, again, we had made all these other decisions, to leave a high cost of living area. I mean, I suspect the audience knows my story, sadly, at this point, but I'm happy to go into it, of course.
Was there ever this idea that maybe I'm not doing the right part of accounting, and that if I found something within it that I was more passionate about, I might not be in such a rush to get there?
Yeah, it's possible. I think, in fairness, I did pick the wrong career path in accounting. I suspect. So basically, when you go into public accounting, you have two main options. You have tax or audit. There are other ancillary choices that you can make, but those are the two main ones. I think I would have liked audit dramatically better, going into companies and looking at their books and trying to figure things out, like more detective style. That's a little more my forte, but I think it's just luck of the draw kind of thing. Or as a 22-year-old kid, I applied at that point as the big five. I applied for tax at two of them and audit at three, and it just wound up where I went up working was for tax. So long story short, I suspect I would have liked audit slightly better, but I think there were so many fundamental structural issues that I didn't like about accounting in general, and also different types of jobs where you have billable hours. So think lawyer, where you have to essentially look at your time on a 6 or 15-minute basis. I mean, Doc, I kid you not, on 6-minute basis, I had to mark down tenths of an hour on my billable hours, which was just mind-numbingly terrible. Just corporate America generally, and FaceTime and all the things that you needed to do to quote unquote succeed. It just never made sense to me. Like, my brain has always been about work output and quality, as opposed to showing up for a certain number of hours or making certain friends, or, just things like that. That never appealed to me. So yeah, I mean, yes and no is ultimately the answer, I think.
So you were very intentional about this idea of becoming financially independent. When you hit your number, was it like, boom, jackpot, I'm out? Or did you end up continuing to work for a while once you were financially independent?
Yeah. So my story is somewhat more complicated than that, more detailed, I guess, because there's the intersection of entrepreneurship into my FI journey. And I think a lot of our FI journeys have some aspect of I always still hate the term side hustle, but side hustles or entrepreneurship or business building. So when I left my job, which is actually almost 8 years ago to the day, we're coming up on the eighth anniversary as we're recording this. And yeah, I mean, I had not reached that true mathematical point of financial independence at that point. But I was very, very far along the path. It was probably somewhere in the 70 to 80% range of that FI number. But at that point, I had been building websites just mostly for fun, but always in the back of my mind, hey, could I make some money from this? Could I prove out a business model that could work given a small amount of time input? So going way back, and just to fill in the blanks, because this is, I think, vaguely interesting, is I had a website called richmondsavers.com, which is like the world's worst website name. But but we lived in Richmond. We saved money. We were the Richmond Savers. So anyway, I got big time into travel rewards, so using credit card rewards points. And I wound up starting a free travel rewards coaching service is what I called it. So I would actually jump on the phone with people entirely for free. So people who came to my website could sign up for essentially a 30-minute call for me. I would chat with them about using credit card rewards points. I would draft up a quick email to them on if they wanted to go to Disney World or Paris or Hawaii or whatever it was. Here's what you have to do. And then theoretically, they would use my credit card links to sign up for these cards in the future. So it was kind of like putting my accountant's hat on. Like we call this like the talent stack, right? So from the Scott Adams book. And basically, I was an accountant who understood lifetime value of customer. I was also a personal finance blogger and who was into travel rewards, but I didn't have a lot of website traffic. How could I make this into a business? So I figured even with a small amount of traffic, I could basically do this coaching service. And if somebody signed up for a couple of credit cards, the lifetime value of customer for me could be pretty significant given a 30 or 40-minute time commitment for me. So anyway, why I'm going into this is I proved out that business model. I mean, Doc, I was not making a ton of money, but like maybe $1,000 a month or something like that. But given that I was only doing that a couple hours a week, okay, maybe there's something here, right? And then again, I am 70+% of the way to FI. I have proven out this business model to myself. And interestingly, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back with my corporate career was similar to what I was saying about that FaceTime and how it never made sense to me. You have to be in the office from X hour to Y hour. And the VP of our department, who's a really great guy, I have no issues with him in general, but it was one day the hours of our job changed, basically just to kind of like prove a point to like the CFO or something, like in a totally different state that, oh, we're pulling our weight. It was this nonsensical thing. And all of a sudden, instead of coming in at 8:30, I needed to be there at 8 or something like that. Instead of 9, it was 8:30. And it was just, I mean, honestly, it pissed me off so much. I can't even tell you. And it was just, forget this crap. I am out of here. This is it. And like, I know it sounds childish on the backside of it, but like, it was just such like an arbitrary decision that had nothing to do with who we were, what the output we were putting out for such a small department, for a tax department, for a massive company. Like, we should have been praised, and we got this penalty basically. And so that was straw that broke the camel's back. I think I put my notice in January of 2015. And on February 1st, 2015, I went up starting the website travelmiles101.com, which enabled me to kind of scale my individual travel coaching service. And so it all is inextricably linked here, Doc, of like, that FI path, the not loving aspects of corporate America, and entrepreneurship. So it's amazing how it all kind of came together at that one time.
So it's clear when you were at the CPA firm, you were doing work, you were an employee. On the other hand, then you started with Richmond Savers, something you were doing on the side, something you would do even if you weren't making immediate money from it. Let's talk about the nature of work. Clearly, when you were working for the CPA firm, that was work. Was Richmond Savers work? And did making money have anything to do with it? Was it a hobby? Like, how would you classify it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think nature of work and earning money, I think that's something we should definitely talk a good bit about here. But I will answer your question directly, which is Richmond Savers did not feel like work to me. Richmond Savers, especially at the beginning. So let's split up that travel rewards coaching service. From just creating what I thought was interesting content that could help people. And I think that has kind of always been the through line for me on everything I've done from Richmond Savers on, which is Richmond Savers, Travel Miles, and now ChooseFI, is creating interesting content that I think can help people, and maybe that I'm curating and clarifying in a way that if I'm not the only person that can do it, but I think I'd like to believe at least that I have a way of clarifying things that other people can understand and take action on. And I think that has always been something that like I've been especially proud of. And I think that has been where I think that I add value. I don't think I'm necessarily setting the world on fire with brand new ideas. I think I'm a pretty clear thinker, but I'm not setting the world on fire with new ideas. It's just plain and simple. But can I clarify things? Can I curate things? Yeah. I mean, that's what I do. And I think I tried to do that from the very beginning of, hey, this is how we're living our lives. Here's what I think you could take away from it, because it's all about relating to people, right? So like, were there other families like ours out there that could benefit from this, that maybe like they don't realize just with a few little changes, they could make their lives dramatically better. And so it didn't feel like work at all. Like creating content like that did not feel like work. But then, it's interesting, right? Where money making creeps into things. And, the travel rewards thing, I think it, and what I've always tried, and obviously I'm not perfect and I've fallen down on this at points, but where I've always tried to do is make things win-win. So can I produce quality, actionable content that helps you? And if you get help from it, you click on a link of mine and I happen to earn money at no cost to you. Like that has always felt like a win-win and something I could sleep very, very soundly with, and didn't feel like I was exploiting anybody or trying to earn money off of their back, nothing like that. So that is what I always did with the credit card affiliate links. And I still to this day feel great about that. That said, would I have created the content if I could earn no money from it? So yeah, I'd like to believe that I would have created the article on how we went to Disney World, which was the only article that ever mattered on Richmond Savers, essentially. Right? I'm like, would I have created that? Unquestionably, I would have. Would I have created the Travel Miles 101 course that walked people through travel rewards? I suspect that I would have, because it didn't take me that long to create. It was fun. But would I have jumped on the phone at my lunch hour? I mean, Doc, I'm working as a corporate tax manager, and at 12 and 12:30 Eastern time, I had 2 call slots for random people from my website. Would I have done that? I mean, I can't imagine if I made $0 from it, or there was a chance to make $0. It's hard to be intellectually honest and say that I would have done that if I could earn $0 from it.
I was just going to say, and I have to admit, I'm being a little bit of a stickler here, right? Because I'm looking at you as almost to financial independence at that point, or pretty much on your way. And I'm looking at it through the lens again of that tweet. Okay, if you truly love every second of it, but you only get 90 years on this planet, so choose very wisely. It brings up this question, right? Is how much do we have to love what we're doing, especially when we have enough money to decide it's worth doing? Because I've found that no matter how much I love something, there are always some pain points. I love making this podcast, but there are definitely pain points associated with it. I mean, I guess I could pay to have someone else do almost everything that's painful, but at some point I know that, there's going to be some things that I don't love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And as I'm hearing the tweet, I agree obviously with my sentiment, right? And I still hold to that. But it's hard to be nuanced and not sound dogmatic when you have 140 or 280 characters, right? So I think that's some of my frustration with social media in general, which is funny because when you said we were going to do this episode on a tweet that I did, I'm like, oh my God, I probably only tweeted like 10 things of interest in my entire life. So that was quite a surprise. Yeah, I just generally I don't love social media. I think part of also why it's hard to do a podcast or create any content is you're always going to have, like, life is not black and white. There's always nuance, right? And like, I mean, you know this, Jordan, right? Like when we talk, we try to give the most broadly applicable information as we can. But there are always carve outs. There's always going to be some individual person who has a situation that doesn't make sense for, right? So, I get those emails, and I feel badly on some sense, and I wish that I could do better. I wish that I had 100 hours in a day that I could record for every single person, but it just doesn't work that way. So anyway, going back to the tweet, I hold to the sentiment of it in the sense that I think people hold on to jobs potentially for the wrong reasons. And I think often, especially people who have long since reached financial independence, they're holding onto it for making money is the way that they feel that they get validation, or one more yearism, right? Which is, oh, am I really at FI? Is this all going to come imploding down? I should just do one more year. And one more year turns into 3 more years, turns into 10 more years, right? Or the people who just maybe they like a tiny little fraction of what they do, but the rest of it is made up of, old school office space like TPS reports and meetings and, just nonsense that I think, frankly, a lot of corporate America is. Like when I've been talking to him, I try to give these like broad, wide ranging lessons to my daughters that are not as boring as that sounds as I'm saying that. But they're asking me like, how many hours, if you're there from like 9 to 5, how many hours are you actually working? Like, and I said, honestly, I think most people with office jobs are probably working 2 to 4 hours of those 8 at most, like actual deep work. And I know that's a broad brush and whatnot, but I mean, if it were just, okay, this is the actual aspect of my job that I like, and I could just carve that out, I think that would be really cool to just do the parts of your job that you like. But right, we're both realistic to know that like that's not the way the world works. Like we have these idealized versions of the FI world, and that comes crashing down when you reach the intersection of like, okay, the theory versus the reality.
So, if you're going to tell me that a tweet is not unassailable now, I don't know if we can even agree to continue this podcast, but, so let me turn that around a little bit. There are a lot of people who actually reach financial independence. They like something small about work, right? Like I loved hospice work, but that was 10% of what I was doing all day as a doctor. On the other hand, they have no clue what actually they want to do with themselves. What do you tell a person like that who actually says, you know what, I don't need the money anymore, but I know I love the small part of work, versus going home, sitting around and being lost and feeling this crushing pressure of trying to figure out my purpose in life when I just don't know what it is?
Yeah. So, I mean, before we get there, can I just ask you about, so that 10% of your job that was the hospice work, is there any world, and this is where the theory might come crashing into the reality, like, is there any world or any hospital or any situation where you could have just done that 10%?
So there is. And, I often look at my trajectory and I think, boy, if I had known more about kind of purpose and identity as a very young physician, I would have gone into hospice in the first place and might not have felt that big push and struggle to become financially independent because I probably would have enjoyed my job a lot more. But instead, I wasn't very in touch with who I was or what I needed as a person and went after a field in medicine that didn't really connect with who I was, and therefore burned out and felt like I had to get to financial independence as fast as possible to escape it. So yes, there was a world, and I had to eventually create that world in financial independence. And the way I created that is I kept on subtracting out all the things I didn't like until I created the position I wanted, which was 10 to 15 hours a week of hospice work in which I didn't do nights, weekends, and was mostly virtual. But I had to create that job over time.
Interesting. So I know you've said that you did a lot of like administration and like running things, or at least my understanding in one of your last jobs. But so was this 10 to 15 hours? Was that after? Was that before this job? Or like place me in time? Because I think this is important.
So this is the last thing I did was I just got rid of everything but hospice. And then I narrowed it down to just working 10 to 15 hours a week.
Okay. Interesting. So now, like you just said, okay, this was something that I absolutely loved doing. This was maybe a call. Like I know you've talked so many times about the intersection of identity, being a physician, et cetera, but also genuinely what you loved about being a physician. And you just said, hey, I have it for 10 hours a week, but yet you're not doing that anymore. Right?
Well, I'm still doing, I still work in hospice 10 hours a week.
Do you really?
I do.
Oh,
it's the one part of medicine
Jordan,
that I would do even if I wasn't getting paid for it. So I know that's the thing I want to stick with. So I still do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I totally lost the plot there. I think that's incredible. Okay. That is wonderful. So you will continue to do this. So you have just answered the question of, like again, what I think of in theory of what could somebody do? Can they drill down to the absolute essence of what they enjoy about their job and not all the other BS, the driving to the job, the trying to impress people, the trying to get promotions, the having to go to meetings, all of that stuff that people, nobody likes that. And I mean, frankly, I'm not sure what percentage of people actually like the meat of their job, but if we're saying there's some percentage, right? You are case in point. There were aspects of some intellectually stimulating aspects of my job that sure I would have done for 30 minutes a day because it's fun, right? It's neat to do things. I suspect there are many people that get value from their job like that, but it's only a portion. But it is doable, right? Like it's possible to find that. And I think what I would tell people to get around to your actual question is, okay, so you've reached a point of financial independence. I think that's the where we're going here as a baseline. So you've reached this point of FI, and I think we should also then have another line of reasoning on before you get to FI what you can be doing to prepare. But we'll put that to the side for now. So you've reached the point of financial independence, and now you have essentially two major options. Of course, there are always more options in life, but we're talking like the most obvious ones are you can continue doing your exact same job, or you can leave your job and exercise your benefits of FI, right? So I think that is a completely artificial construct. And I think what we've been surprised by, I think pleasantly surprised by, is how much power we all have that we don't believe that we do, that we did have, let's say. So now an employer, obviously by definition of employing you, must be getting more value from your work output than the amount of money they pay you. Right? Can we use that as kind of background?
Agreed. Or they wouldn't employ you. Yes.
They would not employ you. Right. Or they're terrible business people and they'll go out of business, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll put that to the side and we'll say, by definition, they're getting more value from you than you're getting in salary. Now, okay. So that means your work output is doing something significant for their company that they need. Now, it costs a whole lot of money and it's a lot of headache and heartburn for employers to find new employees, especially in this day and age, right? To find someone capable, which you don't know if they're capable from an interview, frankly, but hoping that person's capable, then training them and then seeing how they're going to work on the job, right? Whereas they have you, they know the work output you do. And if you basically say to them, hey, look, I'm essentially, and this is, you're not being rude, you're not putting anybody, there's no like ultimatum here. It's just, okay, I'm reaching the point where I am going to, you can use whatever phraseology you want, retire or leave the job or whatever. But what I would really love is X, Y, and Z. I would love to keep doing this because I think I'm uniquely suited to it. I think I add value. I think it adds value to my life. Like, what would it look like? What would it look like to change this to something not traditional? And Jordan, I mean, frankly, before COVID, I think a lot of employers would have maybe had an issue with non-traditional work situations. But the last 2.5 years have opened all of our eyes that non-traditional work situations can work exceedingly well. So I think as we're recording this, the world is much more open to these type of conversations than they were 30 months ago or slightly more, right? So I think you have a little more leverage there because people have seen that it works. So what would it look like to have that conversation? Is that going to be uncomfortable? I mean, of course it is. Any kind of thing. You talked about dread before. Like I would dread a conversation like that, even though there's nothing to dread, right? Like in life, one of the big things that we've gotten from ChooseFI, one of our favorite kind of taglines is everything is negotiable. And I think it's just something that has really resonated with the FI community is you're not looking, again, like I said before, win-win. You're looking to create win-win situations. And if you're not so scared to negotiate, and I always was my whole life in lots of things, but when you're not afraid and when you're just a nice person and when you approach something with openness and humility and you say like, hey, look, this is what I'm looking to get, what I can give. I think you'd be surprised at what your employer might offer you. And it might be a situation where you're working 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever X number of hours a week, doing just the aspects that you love, which presumably are going to be the parts that add the most value to this employer. And that sounds like a win.
We are talking to Brad Barrett. He is the host of the ChooseFI podcast, and we are talking about whether the goal is to be jobless in financial independence. We're going to take a short break. I'm Doc G, and this is the Earn and Invest podcast. Okay, I know I'm going to do something really annoying right here. I had so much fun giving away 5 J.L. Collins books, The Simple Path to Wealth. They were signed. People were so excited about it. I got tons of responses. I am going to do another giveaway, but I'm not going to do it now. But I wanted to prepare everyone, because the problem with doing a giveaway is that often people listen to my episodes days later after they've been dropped, and therefore they are already too late. So I'm giving you fair warning. Sometime in the next month, I am going to give away 5 signed copies of my book, Taking Stock, which is about what I, as a hospice doctor, can teach you about money and life. The reason why I'm telling you now is I think this will be a great Christmas present. In fact, in order to win this book, you're going to have to show me proof that you've either bought my book or left a review on Amazon. If you give me that proof, I am happy to send this book. Maybe you want to send it as a holiday present, and therefore you can give me the name and address of a loved one, and I will send them a copy, hand-signed, of my book, Taking Stock. I'm going to do this sometime over the next month. I'm not going to tell you when, but the minute the episode drops announcing this book giveaway, you will then have to contact me and let me know you're interested. Show me proof that you've bought a copy of my book or left an Amazon review, and I will send a Christmas present to whoever you wish. All you have to do is give me their name and address. Can't wait to do the book giveaway that is coming in the future. Now back to the episode. Let me reintroduce you. We are talking to Brad Barrett. He's the host of the Top 50 Business Podcast, ChooseFI, a personal finance expert and a certified public accountant. He has a passion for financial independence and helping people take action to make their lives richer in every way. Brad, we've been talking about this idea of work and employment and whether the goal of financial independence is to leave your job. Let's talk about the problems leaving your job solves and the problems that it doesn't. I mean, does that automatically fix life problems? Like, do you say, I'm getting rid of this toxic job and now nirvana, life's good?
Hardly. I think obviously subtracting something hugely negative is never going to be a bad thing in my estimation. But to imagine that just by subtracting, you're going to reach a point of nirvana, I think is just not the way the world works. We had a guest on years ago called the Happy Philosopher. He was actually a physician. And yeah, he talked about alligators and kittens. And it was really a cool thing. So, right, get rid of all these hugely negative aspects, the alligators first, because if you had alligators in your home, you'd probably want to get rid of them fairly quickly, right? And so I think of toxic relationships, toxic work. For me, it was consuming too much news and just getting consumed by that. So like huge negatives, I think should be, you should do what you can to get rid of them and kind of identify and get rid of them in your life. But that said, I think you have to be running towards something, not away from something. And you said, what is, the goal of financial independence, right? And this is something I think you and I could have an interesting talk about, right? The goal of financial independence, is it to have no job? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think anything is that simplistic in life. And having a job is great if that's what you want to do with your time. I think that's fine. So like anybody who thinks that like I or anybody or the financial independence community generally are like anti-job, I think that's just so hopelessly simplistic and just off the mark. And if we are somehow exuding that or getting that, or that's what people get from us, then we're doing a bad job, frankly. You and I and people like us are doing a bad job, because I don't think that is the case. So I think what we have hit on, and lots of our guests and our friends, right? Like Brandon, the mad scientist, is somebody who jumps to mind, and like kind of laying the groundwork for what makes you happy years before you reach FI. Because if FI is just a number to you, if FI is just a point in time where, hey, that number on my screen at Vanguard or Fidelity or wherever tells me I'm FI, and that's all the work I've ever put in, right? Like all the work I've ever put in on this journey is just to get to a number, I suspect strongly you're going to be pretty unhappy, because you haven't done any of the work to figure out, like, what am I here for? What do I want to do? What lights me up? Where do I add value? Where do I get value? Like, what am I doing here? And I think so. A couple things spring to mind. I want to talk about both like testing this, and also there never not being like a final answer. I think because and again, Jordan, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but like I don't live like a life of, again, the rainbows and unicorns that you got to chuckle out of before. Like my life is not rainbows and unicorns every day, and I suspect yours isn't either. And I suspect nobody's life is rainbows and unicorns every day. And again, if we transmit the thought as, financial independence podcasters that life is great the second you hit FI, or it's guaranteed, like, no. Like that's just not the way the world works. Like, is your life dramatically better at FI, even not with the introspection, than you were previously? Yes, I would say on record, it absolutely is. But is your life, like you said, that nirvana? No. I mean, it isn't. And this is constantly evolving. And I think where I was going with like the testing is, you have to put the work in. You have to try things. And I think that's part of the fun of life, is trying things. And you never know. Like, I've heard so many people say, like, I want to sail around the world when I reach FI. And like, they've never stepped foot in a boat before, or something akin to that. Like, they've never done anything. And like, do you really want to sail around the world? Like, are you sure? Should you maybe, like, I don't know, go in the intracoastal waterway for like a couple of days before you decide to, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up here, but like, should you test this? Yeah, you probably should. Like, and of course the big ones come to mind, Jordan, the van life and the this and that, like, or the traveling around the world. Like, those are the obvious low-hanging fruit examples of, hey, you really should test that. But even down to when I reach FI, I'm going to volunteer 3 days a week. Okay, that sounds wonderful, right? And it sounds laudable and all that kind of stuff. But do you really want to do that? When the rubber hits the road and you're showing up to Habitat for Humanity or the soup kitchen 3 days a week, are you just going to be grumbling about that? Because that's pretty bad if so, right? So like, maybe you test that, and it's okay, honestly. Like, you're not a worse person if you just say, hey, I tried Habitat for Humanity, I thought this was going to be something I do every week for the rest of my life, but I just don't like it. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person. Like, you can find lots of ways to give back to the world, add value in your unique way. And I think that might be kind of the essence of my point, is like, you can add value in your unique way, right? Like, would I have ever guessed? I haven't volunteered that much, frankly, since I reached FI, and that's okay. Like, sure, in the back of my mind, do I wish that I was volunteering more? Yeah, I do, right? But have I been adding value to the world in my own unique way? I mean, I think so. I think I've probably helped more people through ChooseFI than I ever could have doing whatever, fill in the blank. I don't want to be, again, trite and say building a house for some. Obviously that's wonderful, right? Like, but am I adding value in my unique way? I think so. And it lights me up. And again, it's always a test.
It's funny. I want to come back to the words work and employment, because, at some point you were talking about what we're doing as podcasters. And you said, if we're doing a good job at being podcasters, we shouldn't be telling people that the goal is not to have a job. But it reminds me of this idea that almost everyone I know who got to financial independence, who's now out in the world doing things, whether that be Brandon, the mad scientist, who's making music, doing his podcast and blogging, or me, who's writing a book and podcasting, or you, who's podcasting and working on ChooseFI, we all still, in a sense, have a job. We all still do work. I guess what's interesting about this is we have so much more complete control over the aspects of our day-to-day activities doing this work in these jobs than we ever did when we were employed.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. And there obviously are aspects. And again, this is where it's so important that we're clear, especially on the other side of FI, that every day and every aspect of everything, even if you try to be intentional, even if you try to figure it out, is not rainbows and unicorns. It is not, right? Like, are there aspects of ChooseFI that I detest? Obviously there are. I'd be lying to you.
So there are some things in the last 6 months you've dreaded.
Well, dread, I think dread is where I'm...
Detest, not dreaded. Sorry, detested.
Detest, yeah. Detest is equally as strong, but maybe slightly different. And detest might be a little too strong even there. But like, are there aspects of ChooseFI that in my perfect world that I'm not doing? Yeah, I mean, come on. I'd be a complete fool and a liar if I was saying no. That every second I'm adding value and I'm getting value. Like, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to find those ways. And I think that's kind of my whole kind of mindset and ethos behind my life generally. Is just I don't beat myself up for mistakes, or I try not to. And I don't beat myself up for, hey, this isn't perfect. I just try to look for like little pain points or little things that I could do to make my life better. And I mean, is that like a straight line up? Like, no, it obviously isn't. Like, I'm not like ruthlessly optimizing every day. Like that again is not, it's just not my lived experience. But am I trying to find things? Like, am I trying to be more efficient? Am I trying to maybe find ways around those aspects of this quote unquote job? If we'll go and say that ChooseFI is a job for me, because I think it would almost any way you define it, it would fit the technical definition of job. Are there aspects of that job that I don't like? Yes, there are. And am I trying to, in my way, because also, frankly, I'm the business owner or co-owner, right? So I have a little more latitude. I am at financial independence. So I have some resources. My business makes some money, so I can choose to spend money since I don't need the profit per se, right? So like, are there ways that I can make my life easier by maybe hiring somebody? So that's how I choose to think about it, Jordan, is like, okay, maybe I'm the constraint, actually. So like, my apathy for something, or my maybe negative feelings for a certain aspect might be making me the constraint in a system where somebody else, and this is Jillian Johnsrud talked about this at a Camp FI years ago, and she was talking about, like, I won't get her exact terminology right, and I'll be kicking myself afterwards, but it was something to the effect of like, everyone has their kind of circle of competence, and certain people get lit up by different aspects of jobs, different aspects of life, and you might find it utterly ridiculous that they love that area, but yet they do, and it's something that you absolutely hate. So maybe there's someone out there that this point in my business, which might be responding to email, or that's probably a bad example because I actually do kind of like that on the most part, but it gets overwhelming. Maybe sorting through the email might be a different one. So we get 50 spam emails a day. Like, me hiring somebody to go into the email account in the morning to filter all that nonsense, and then I can swoop in and answer emails and questions and add value. Like, okay, maybe that's the rethink. So as opposed to changing email broadly, and I know this is such a specific example, Jordan, but I think the mindset is broadly applicable to people, and that's why I'm spending time on it. Is that okay, in my mind, if you ask me, is email like a negative sometimes? It absolutely is. But could I find those aspects of the email that I hate and maybe hire somebody to do that? And sure, is there somebody out there who's getting lit up by the fact that they can filter the spam emails out of ChooseFI? No, but maybe they need a side hustle and this is something easy. So like there are always reasons to do a job. And like, could I, again, would that make my life easier? Am I the constraint on, I don't know, reaching out and getting more voicemails? We've always called ChooseFI the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. That's our little tagline. But what if getting voicemails and going through them and editing them or whatever, or just figuring out, is this worthwhile? Like, that's kind of annoying. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of time. Like, and if I'm the constraint there, then what's the natural progression as a human being is, oh, maybe I'll send in a voicemail much less frequently on the podcast, or maybe I'll mention it much less frequently in my email newsletter. Right. So like, but what if I had somebody that could actually do that? And then all of a sudden this becomes just a straight value add, because I would love to have more of the community's input, but maybe in the back of my mind, I'm not doing it because it's annoying.
So what we're talking about generally is this idea of optimizing once we're doing that work we find fulfilling to make it less arduous, get rid of the friction, so to speak. Let me ask you about something tangential briefly here. We've all seen those studies about how people, once they retire, morbidity, mortality go up, especially in men, middle-aged men. How do you think that relates to this conversation? I mean, clearly these are people who are probably doing things where they have lots of things they don't like doing at their jobs, and yet people's health seems to decline once they retire.
Yeah. Obviously, that's a big issue. I don't know anecdotally, and again, it's only anecdote, but I don't know that impacts the financial independence community quite as much as it does the broad swath of society. Again, very anecdotal, but and I'd be curious, since you're actually a medical doctor, I'd be curious your thoughts on this. But I think a lot of people, when they have no purpose, when they have no reason to essentially get off the couch, that they're just kind of they've worked so hard all these years and that they deserve a rest, right? Like, and those years might be 30 to 50 years, like, and maybe they have let themselves go. Like, I can understand why people sit on the couch and feel that they deserve a rest, right? And I mean, does that make it the perfect answer? No, it obviously doesn't. And your body only deteriorates. I see this with my father, frankly. So this is very personal for me, Jordan. Very, very personal. And it's a source of incredible frustration for me that, this has been his chosen path. And I think it is a lack of having something else to do. And I don't think that something else necessarily had to be a job by any means. I think he worked hard for a long time, but it's in the absence. And this is what we were talking about before, of like trying to figure out what you want to do with your time, because sitting on the couch for 16 waking hours a day watching sports it's not going to cut it. It's just not. So if that means doing some type of quote unquote job, or a real job, or some aspect of a job, or again, volunteering, or just, I don't know, doing exercise, like you were talking, or finding a community. There's so many meetup groups. Like, my brother has actually tried really hard to find meetup groups that do athletic things, because he thinks it's going to help him, A, just be a healthier human, but B, find like-minded people, right? So like, how do you find like-minded people? I think is another broadly applicable thing for those of us in the FI community, is like, how can you increase your luck surface area, which is what I call it, right? So like, what are there ways that I can increase the likelihood that I'm going to find friends or community? Like, is it going to a bar at 1 p.m. and drinking beers, or is it waking up at 6 a.m. and going to an outdoor exercise class? I think for me, that's a very, very obvious answer of the latter, right? So I think like finding those ways where you can find things you like to do, the intersection of finding things you like to do, and meeting people, finding community, like this is all inextricably linked. And I think just to kind of close this portion of the conversation of like health, I think it's just something that, again, very anecdotal, but I have noticed pretty broadly in the FI community that people now do have the time and space. And I think this is where, when the lack of money stress, which is just so ever present and prevalent for most people, is when that stress is not there, you have the time to take a step back and survey your life and say, what do I want to do? Right? Who are those people I want in my life? How can I spend time, again, in my case, like trying to build a healthy life? And for me, exercise, being outside, all of these things are important. Like, I mean, no joke, Jordan, I would have laughed at you, or I would have laughed at myself 7 years ago or 10 years ago if I had said this out loud, but I just did a CrossFit competition this past weekend. I'm a 43-year-old guy, and my wife and I just did a team CrossFit competition. Now, lest anybody think I'm some CrossFit expert, it was Festivus for the rest of us. So the old school Seinfeld thing, but it was super intense and it was awesome. And it was amazing. If you had asked me when I was a young kid and I was looking at what a 43-year-old dad of two looked like in the 1980s, I don't think that person was doing CrossFit competitions. And well, CrossFit didn't exist, but I don't think they were doing something comparable. And it's pretty cool that, and I think it's onward and upward from here. Like I don't consider myself on a downward trajectory health-wise at all. I think it's only up.
Well, Brad Barrett, I wanted to thank you for being on the show today. I want to repeat this quote from your tweet one more time, just to make a point. If you continue working after reaching financial independence, you're picking that job over literally everything else in the world you could otherwise do with your time. Okay, if you truly love every second of it, but you only get 90 years on this planet, so choose very wisely. I didn't bring that quote up because it was unassailable, and not that we should follow it to a T either. But the idea is, when you get your financial framework in order, when you're working towards financial independence or get there, it's not that you stop working. It's not that you don't have a job. It's just that you get to choose the work and the jobs you want that really have meaning and purpose for you. And you have ultimate control over when you start and stop them and whether they're fulfilling you or not. That doesn't mean you won't have moments that are difficult. You won't have friction in your life. It just means you'll have a lot more control over it. And that's what living a good life really looks like. That's what doing CrossFit competitions when you're 43, married, and has 2 kids looks like. I want to end this episode the way I end every episode, by asking you, Brad, what is up next in your life, and how can people reach out to you if they want to know more? So first and foremost, what is going on with Brad Barrett?
Yeah. So what's up next? Well, interestingly, and we've talked about this, Jordan, is I am now the solo host of ChooseFI. So Jonathan, my longtime co-host and business partner, is not doing the on-air podcasting, but everything's great. Lest anybody be concerned, everything's great. He's, there are different seasons of life, and he's still very actively engaged in ChooseFI. So nothing bad there. But yeah, it's been super exciting to be a solo host, and I know you went through something similar, and it's obviously a lot of nerves. But it's been almost universally positive for me. I've been very excited. And I think that's what's up next, is just trying to figure out how can I be the best podcast host that I can possibly be? How can I add the most value to the financial independence community? How can I get that community involved and help them take action to make their lives better? And I think that's really cool. And also just kind of going back to our old back catalog and things that used to work that we may have dropped. And like, it's just exciting, frankly, to just be able to really write the future of the show myself. And I mean, Jonathan and I have always been amazing partners, so there's certainly nothing negative in that regard, but it's very different when it's entirely your thing. So yeah, I guess that is what is up now. And next is I'm really trying to grow the show and just make it much more crowdsourced than it's ever been, even though I think we've done a good job of that.
And how can people reach out to you if they have questions?
Yeah. So the best way actually is to get on my email newsletter. So I personally write and send out a weekly newsletter that I think I can say like, I think it adds a ton of value. I mean, I genuinely think it's good. I don't normally tell people to sign up for email newsletters because it normally clogs up your inbox, but I think this will add value to your life. So ChooseFI.com/subscribe. And literally every single week, I ask you to send in, hey, what was the one action you made that you took this week to make your life better? Send it in. And then I actually copy and paste 6 or 7 of them every single week in next week's newsletter. And people just get so much inspiration from what others in our community are doing to make their lives better. So long story short is you literally just get on that email and just hit reply and it comes directly to me. I read every single email.
This has been the Earn and Invest podcast. On behalf of myself, Doc G, I'd like to thank Brad Barrett. That's a wrap.